Hi. She waited until after dinner, when the house was quiet and the pretense of normalcy was still intact. That, I would realize later, was calculated. I'd started loading the dishwasher when she called my name. Her tone was deliberate, too steady. I wiped my hands on a towel and turned. She was sitting at the table, posture straight, hands folded in front of her. There was a stillness to her, the kind that only comes when someone's already rehearsed what they're about to say. "I cheated," she said. "Because you're too nice. I needed more." Just like that. No build-up, no tremor in her voice. A clean strike. I stood there, towel still in hand. The words didn't register at first, not really. My brain grasped them one at a time, trying to assemble their meaning. I cheated. You're too nice. I needed more. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, too slow, too loud. I wanted to speak, to ask, "What are you saying? When? With who? Why now?" But nothing came. My mouth stayed closed. She was watching me carefully, not in guilt, but with a subtle tension, like someone waiting for a bomb to go off, like she expected, or wanted, me to explode. I couldn't. My entire body had gone cold, the shock numbing everything else. I looked at her, really looked, and what I saw froze me even more. There was no regret in her eyes, only relief, as if this was something she needed to get off her chest, and now it was my problem to process. She exhaled, almost casually, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. I turned away, placing the towels slowly on the counter. My hands were steady, too steady. Behind me, the air seemed to hum with her expectation. I knew the script she wanted: outrage, slammed doors, shouted accusations. A scene she could point to later. I wouldn't give her that. Not tonight. I took a breath and let my mind drift, not forward but backward. Just 4 days ago, we'd been at a dinner party with mutual friends. She'd laughed at my stories, leaned into my side, fingers brushing mine under the table. I'd driven us home while she sang along to the radio, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I'd believed all of it. The contrast made me feel physically ill. I stared at the kitchen counter, breath slow and shallow. A dozen questions tangled in my mind, none of them able to find a voice. Behind me, her chair creaked as she shifted. Then her voice again, soft this time, but testing. "You're not going to say anything?" I turned slightly, just enough to see her out of the corner of my eye. "Not now." My voice sounded detached, foreign to my own ears. Another pause. Then a faint click of her nails against the tabletop. Waiting, watching, measuring. I walked past her, down the hall to my office, closed the door behind me, the latch clicking louder than usual. In the dim light, I sat in my chair, elbows on my knees, hands clasped tight enough to ache. The cold had seeped into my bones. For long minutes, I just breathed. In, out, in, out. The first coherent thought finally surfaced through the fog. How long? How deep? Who else knew? And beneath it, something darker. What else hasn't she told me? I remembered the late nights she'd been working. The girls' weekends that had always seemed oddly timed. The new wardrobe, the sudden insistence on keeping her phone face down. Pieces that had never quite fit, now snapping into place with sickening clarity. And yet part of me still clung to the hope that this was somehow a mistake, a single lapse, something I could forgive. But another part, the colder, quieter part, knew better. If she could sit across from me and say those words without remorse, she was already gone. The thought tightened in my chest. I sat in that chair for what felt like hours, the house eerily silent beyond the door. Finally, another realization began to crystallize through the shock. If this is just the surface, I need to know what's underneath. The numbness was wearing off, replaced by something sharper. Not rage, not yet, but focus. This wasn't going to be an argument. It wasn't going to be an emotional plea. It was going to be an investigation. And I would not be the fool in this story. By morning, the numbness had settled into something colder, a taut wire stretched under my skin. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, her words echoed back. I hadn't confronted her again. Not yet. There was nothing more to say, not until I understood what I was dealing with. The house felt unnaturally quiet as I made coffee, the hum of the machine the only sound. I could hear her upstairs moving around, doors opening and closing, the muted thud of heels on the floorboards. Then the doorbell rang. It was barely 9 a.m. I opened the door to find her mother standing there, crisp blouse, oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Purse clutched tight to her side like she was bracing for battle. "Good morning," she said, stepping past me before I could respond. Her perfume hit me, sharp, floral, suffocating. I followed her into the living room. My wife came down the stairs a moment later, perfectly composed, not a hint of last night's conversation on her face. They exchanged a glance, brief, but telling. A silent agreement. Her mother turned to me. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't sit. Neither did she. Her tone was clipped, practiced, like she'd given this speech before. "I know about the situation. And frankly, I'm not surprised. You've always been too soft. Too passive. A man needs to take charge in a marriage." My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. She pressed on, eyes narrowing. "You think being nice is enough? It isn't. A woman needs more than that. You left her unfulfilled. You made her feel trapped." My wife stood by the stairs, arms crossed, silent. No defense. No denial. Just watching. It was surreal, like I'd walked into a courtroom where the verdict had already been written. I tried to stay still, to listen, but my pulse was climbing. Her mother's voice sharpened. "I told her for months this was inevitable. She needs a better life. And frankly, you should have seen this coming." I felt the edge of the coffee table dig into my thigh where I stood beside it, muscles locked. One more breath, one more second, and something inside me snapped. Not outwardly. Not a scene. Just a clean, final click in my mind. I turned without a word, walked to the entryway. My keys were on the hook. I grabbed them. Behind me, her mother's voice rose. "Running away now? Proves my point." I paused at the door. Without turning, I said, "I'm leaving because I can still think clearly. You should both try it sometime." And then I was outside, the doors shutting firmly behind me. The air was cool, sharp against my skin. I stood by my car for a moment, grounding myself, heart hammering. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't deserved this. The fog in my head lifted a little more. If they wanted to rewrite the story, to make me the villain of it, they were going to find it wasn't that simple. I got in the car and drove. No destination, just motion. By the time I pulled into a friend's driveway an hour later, one thing was clear. I wasn't going back until I understood exactly how deep this betrayal went. And when I did, I'd be ready. I stayed out that night. No message to her. No calls answered. My phone buzzed a few times, her number once, then her mother's. I let them ring. Silence was my only answer. I crashed at Rob's place. An old friend, the kind of man who didn't ask questions unless you wanted him to. I told him just enough. "Something's happened. I need space. I'll explain when I can." He nodded, handed me a beer, left the guest room door open. No probing. That simple respect meant more than I could say. By morning, the shock had worn thin, replaced with cold focus. The more I replayed last night's scene, the clearer the pattern became. Her timing, her mother's speech, the smug silence. This wasn't a spontaneous confession. It was staged. Meant to tip me off balance, to provoke a mistake. Not happening. I sat at Rob's kitchen table, coffee cooling at my elbow, laptop open. It was time to start digging. First, the bank accounts. We had joined finances, but I'd always kept an eye on them. Now I looked harder. There wasn't much out of place. She was smart enough not to leave obvious traces. But small details stood out once I was looking for them. A string of boutique hotel charges. One in particular caught my eye. 2 months ago, during what she told me was a girls' weekend out of town. A single night at a local high-end hotel. Too close for an out-of-town trip. Too expensive for a casual stay. I checked the dates against my calendar. That weekend, she'd insisted on taking her own car. Had been oddly cagey about her plans. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, it glared like a red warning light. I made notes, dates, locations, amounts. Kept everything organized. Next, the phone records. I didn't have her passcode, but I didn't need it. Our phone plan let me see call logs and text activity by number. Not content, but patterns. One number stood out. Repeated calls and texts, sometimes late at night, sometimes during the workday. Not a listed contact. The pattern spiked around weekends she claimed to be busy or traveling. I ran the number through an online lookup. No name came up. Burner, or maybe a personal line. Another red flag. I stared at the screen, breathing slow. Each piece alone was circumstantial. Together, they started forming a shape I didn't like. And something deeper gnawed at me, the feeling that this was just surface level, that I was still only seeing the edges of whatever had been going on. I sat back, eyes closed, piecing through memory. Her late arrivals home. The way her moods had shifted, more distant, more irritable, then oddly affectionate right before the girls' weekends, almost guilt-driven. The signs had been there. I hadn't wanted to see them, but now I did. Every single one. By evening, my sadness had burned down to something sharper, anger. Not explosive, not reckless. Cold, focused. She thought I would react emotionally, blow up, storm back into the house yelling, give her and her mother ammunition. Instead, I was going to stay one step ahead. I booked a room under my own name, a hotel with no connection to her, paid from my personal account, quiet, no trail she'd see. I wasn't going back into that house, not until I was ready. And tomorrow, I would start asking the right questions. I spent the next morning alone in the hotel room, shades half drawn against the gray daylight, laptop open, phone face down on the table. The space felt sterile, clean enough to think. I reviewed my notes from the day before, hotel charges, call logs, dates that didn't match the stories she'd told me. It was already more than coincidence, but I knew I didn't have the full picture. Not even close. The pattern nagged at me. This hadn't been impulsive. It had been constructed. Staged. And if it was staged, there would be threads to pull. Her friends. That was the next angle. I made a list. People we both knew, people closer to her. Some I trusted less now, but one name kept standing out. Hannah. She and my wife had been close for years, but Hannah had always struck me as the kind of person who noticed more than she said. And sometimes, in little ways, I'd sensed a flicker of guilt in her when we crossed paths these last few months. It was a risk, but I texted her, need to talk. Just us. No drama. Just the truth. You in? Her reply came faster than I expected. Yes. Coffee shop, 2 p.m. By the time I arrived, my pulse had settled into a slow, deliberate rhythm. The numbness from that first night was gone, replaced by something cleaner. The place was half empty. Hannah was already there, fingers curled around the mug, eyes scanning the door. When she saw me, she looked away for a second, guilt in that flicker. I sat across from her. No pleasantries. I know part of it, I said. Not all of it. I need to know the rest. She exhaled, tension in her shoulders. I figured you'd find out sooner or later. For a moment she didn't speak. Then, voice low. It's been going on longer than you think. I stayed quiet, letting her fill the space. Close to a year, she said. It started casual, then not so casual. They were careful. She told almost no one. But it's not a secret anymore. Who? I asked. Her fingers tightened on the mug. Daniel Mercer. I leaned back slightly. The name hit harder than I wanted to admit. I knew him. We'd crossed paths. A couple of charity events, a dinner once. Polished. Married. The image of success. He's connected, Hannah said. And older. Your wife. She stopped, as if weighing the next words. She thinks this is an upgrade. The word landed like ice in my gut. And her mother? I asked. Hannah looked away. She knew. She's been pushing your wife to leave. 4 months. Told her she deserved more, a better life. The pieces clicked fast now. The confession. The smug silence. The mother's sudden arrival. A script rehearsed and ready. I asked one more thing. The girls' weekends, were those with you? Hannah hesitated, shook her head. Not always. Sometimes with me. Sometimes not. Her voice caught slightly. I'm sorry. I should have said something. I nodded once, stood. Thank you for your honesty. She looked down, ashamed. I left her there, head bowed over the mug. Back in the hotel, adrenaline burned through my veins. I pulled up the phone records again. The number I'd flagged was his, confirmed now. And the pattern was undeniable. Dozens of calls, long gaps when she claimed to be busy with work or friends. It wasn't casual. It was a long-standing relationship outside the marriage. My laptop pinged, an email from the contact I'd sent the number to. Not a burner. Registered personal line. Daniel Mercer. I stared at the name. The walls of this thing were closing fast, but something still didn't sit right. The confession had been too neat. The timing too perfect. Her mother's speech, practiced. They weren't just reacting to guilt. They were maneuvering. I thought back to their expressions. Not fearful, not ashamed. Confident. That was the final clue. This wasn't just a relationship behind my back. It was a setup. They wanted me to react. To lash out, lose control, play the part they'd scripted. The too nice line, that was bait. The more I pieced it together, the clearer it became. She'd already seen a lawyer. Probably lined up her story. If I took the bait, I'd walk straight into the role they wanted for me. Unstable, controlling, weak. They wanted an advantage for court, social leverage, financial leverage. And now I knew. I leaned back in the chair, breath steady. I wasn't going to give them what they wanted. If they wanted a game, they were about to find out I played it better. The next morning, I called an attorney. Quietly. No fanfare. I didn't go with the first name off a billboard or a friend's casual referral. I went with a man I knew by reputation, precise, discreet, and very, very good. We met in his office, tucked into a nondescript building downtown. Neutral ground. I laid out the facts, what I'd learned so far, what I suspected. He listened without interruption, fingers steepled in front of him. When I finished, he said one thing first. "You're right not to go back to that house." Then he asked the sharper questions. Had she withdrawn any unusual sums? Made moves on the joint accounts? Had she changed passwords on shared systems? I answered carefully. Some things I hadn't checked yet. Others, yes. The bank account settings had been changed 2 weeks ago. I'd found that late last night. Her email password had been reset. He nodded. She's preparing. You're smart to get ahead of this. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "And yes, she's already met with a divorce lawyer." I stared at him. "You're sure?" He gave a thin smile. "Certain. Your name is already flagged in the system. She hasn't filed yet, but the wheels are turning." The cold in my chest deepened. The timing made sense now. The confession hadn't been an impulsive act. It was calculated. "She's trying to bait a reaction," I said aloud. He nodded. "They'll want to paint a picture that you're unstable, controlling, whatever suits their narrative. You leaving calmly the other day was the best move you could have made." I left his office sharper than I'd arrived. The emotional fog was gone now, fully burned away by the facts. Back at the hotel, I began locking things down. First, finances. I moved my personal savings to a protected account. Changed every password, banking, email, cloud storage. I wasn't going to leave any open doors. Second, personal property. I made a quiet trip to a storage unit and rented space. Over the next 2 days, in and out at odd hours, I moved what mattered, documents, valuables, anything sentimental that might suddenly disappear once the papers were filed. I kept it methodical. Every move logged. No emotion, just precision. On the third day, an unexpected message came through, from one of our mutual friends, a man I'd always liked, though we hadn't been close lately. It was short. "I think you should know. Mercer's wife found out. It's spreading. Call me if you want the details." I did. The story spilled fast. Mercer's wife had seen something. Text messages, emails, maybe even photos. I didn't ask for details. It was enough to know the relationship was no longer a secret in their circles. And with that, the web began to fray. That night, parked in my car outside the storage unit, I sat and thought. They'd built an entire false story, crafted the narrative. I was too nice, too weak, not enough for her. She was forced to seek more. And if I had played to type, reacted rashly, shown anger, they would have used that to cut me apart in court, in public. But they'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't interested in rage. I was interested in facts, in control. And now, with Mercer's marriage crumbling, their side of the story was about to collapse too. I knew what I had to do next. One final, clean step. No shouting. No confrontation. Just a simple message that I was done playing their game. I texted my attorney, "Prepare everything. I want this clean and fast." Then I packed the last of my things from the hotel. Tomorrow, I would go back, not to fight, not to argue, but to leave my mark, on my terms. The house looked unchanged when I pulled up late that afternoon. The lawn neatly trimmed, the blinds half-drawn in the front windows. From the outside, it could have been any normal day. Inside, it wasn't. I parked a block away, took a slow walk up the street. I wanted a clear head, no adrenaline, no nerves. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to finish it. I carried only one thing, a small box, packed with the last personal items I'd left behind. The rest, the things that mattered, were already in storage. The front door opened as I reached it. She was there, waiting. Her mother was sitting in the living room, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap like a queen presiding over court. Both of them looked composed, but not casual. Too still. They'd expected me to come back eventually, emotional, desperate for some kind of resolution. I gave them nothing. "Afternoon," I said simply, stepping inside. I walked past them to the office, collected the last folder of documents. No wasted motion. When I returned to the living room, they were both watching me carefully. Her mother spoke first. "So, you've decided to come back after all?" Her tone was pointed, baited with disdain. I looked at her evenly. "Not to stay." My wife spoke then, voice quieter, but with an edge. "You've had time to think. I hope you realize this is for the best." There it was again, the narrative. That this was all somehow reasonable. Logical. I set the box down on the table between us, pulled my house key from my pocket, laid it beside the box with a quiet click. Then I looked at her, straight, calm. "You said I was too nice," I said. My voice didn't waver. No. I was patient, loyal, honest. I paused. "But I'm done." Her face flickered, the first real crack. Her mother opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised a hand lightly. "No more speeches," I said. "You can keep your stories. The lawyers will handle the rest." I didn't need to say that I already had one retained. The way her eyes narrowed told me she understood. The silence stretched long. Finally, her mother stood. "You'll regret this," she said sharply. "You're walking away from everything you built together." I smiled a thin, cold smile. "No. I'm walking away with what matters, my self-respect." And with that I turned and left. No slammed doors, no parting shots. Just the clean click of the front door closing behind me. Outside, the sky had darkened, storm clouds gathering in the distance. I walked back to my car through the heavy air, each step lighter than the last. By the time I drove away, the house was already a memory in the rearview mirror. That night, back at the hotel, I slept for the first time in days. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough. When I woke, a message from my attorney was waiting. "Papers will be ready by Friday. We'll stay ahead of them." Another from the same mutual friend. "Mercer's wife has filed. It's a mess over there. Everyone's talking." I leaned back, breath slow. The web they'd spun was already unraveling, and I hadn't had to lift a finger. Just refused to play their game. There would still be battles ahead, legal, financial, social. I knew that. But now, I had the advantage they tried to steal from me, control. And I wouldn't be giving it up again. The papers went out on a Friday. My attorney filed clean, fast, with everything documented, every asset accounted for, every potential trap neutralized. I never went back to that house. Not once. My mailing address changed. My phone number, too. I kept the channels clean, only attorney to attorney. No personal contact. And as the weeks unfolded, the story began to shift. The first ripple came through a friend of mine, someone who moved in overlapping circles with her yoga and social groups. He called one night, voice low, almost disbelieving. "You hear about Mercer?" "I heard his wife filed." I said. "That's not half of it," he replied. "It's blowing up. Friends are picking sides. Some of them didn't even know about you two. Now they do." Apparently, once Mercer's wife found out, she hadn't been quiet. Screenshots had circulated. Names had been named. The image of a clean, mutual separation, the story my wife and her mother had planned to sell, was unraveling fast. Suddenly, the version of events where I was too nice, where she had simply needed more, wasn't holding up, because more people were learning that more had been a married man with his own wreckage trailing behind him. Her social circles fractured. Invitations dried up. People who'd smiled politely at me before now crossed the street when they saw her coming. Mutual friends we'd once hosted for dinner stopped showing up. A few quietly reached out to me, not for gossip, but for closure. They wanted to know the truth. I didn't give them details. Just told them the truth was in the court filings. That was enough. Then came her mother's public attempts to salvage the story. I heard about them through 3 different people. She'd started calling mutual acquaintances, pushing a new narrative, that her daughter had been emotionally abandoned, that I had been cold and distant long before any of this began. But by then, too many facts were already out. Too many people had seen the timelines, heard from Mercer's wife, connected the dots. Each time her mother pushed the story harder, it backfired. More people distanced themselves. The sympathy they'd expected never came. On my side, I kept moving. The divorce proceeded cleanly. No ugly court scenes, just filings, strategy, precision. I stayed ahead at every step. Asset protection held. No surprises in the financials. No wild claims of wrongdoing or instability, because they hadn't baited me into providing any evidence to support such a narrative. And in custody matters, though no one innocent was involved, the clean exit and controlled behavior gave me every advantage I needed to close that door with dignity intact. But the real aftermath wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the quiet moments, nights when the weight of it all still pressed hard, mornings when I'd wake up forgetting for half a second that everything had changed. I didn't lie to myself. It hurt. It would for a long time. But even through that, a strange kind of pride had started to grow. Not for winning. This wasn't a game anyone wins. But for surviving it without losing who I was. I hadn't raged, hadn't played their part, hadn't let betrayal define me. That mattered. One afternoon, months later, I saw her by chance, in a store, with her mother trailing behind. The spark was gone from both of them. Faces drawn, conversations hushed. I walked past without stopping, without a glance, without a single word, because there was nothing left to say. I didn't rush into anything new. No forced, fresh start. No rebound illusions. Healing wasn't linear. Some days were worse than others. But each day forward was a little lighter than the last. Work became my focus. I rebuilt routines, reconnected with friends who mattered. Slowly, carefully, I began shaping a life that was mine alone. And for the first time in a long time, it felt honest. Not easy, but real. And that, I realized, was worth more than anything I'd walked away from. Thank you for watching. Bye.